Hello, this is Lynx-Tetsu, and this is a stat and build guide for Armored Core 3 and Armored Core 3 Silent Line. As mentioned in the Armored Core 1 stat guide, almost every stat's the same. I don't need one for every single game that exists, and you don't need one for every single game. So we're just going to quickly go over the different stats that aren't in the older one, and then go into the actual build guide. So as just for the base part of this here, the main difference here is that cooling is now a stat starting in Armored Core 2. The higher your cooling stat, the faster that your AC cools. There, you typically build up heat when you overboost. I believe the regular booster does not have heat yet, but will in Nexus generation after this. So it's mostly when you're being hit. When there's ambient heat, which you can turn on your cockpit view, also affects it, but it's mostly just when you're being shot. For the computer type, there is rough, simple, and detailed. This is basically how much information your head gives you when an AC or some other thing shows up. Computer voice, male or female, quite obvious. System recovery time, if there's something that interrupts your lock-on, something that causes something to go down, ECM rocket or something, this is how fast it comes back. Map type is the same as before. Biosensor, the same thing. ECM cancel is just if there's ECM in this game, it's still can you block ECM or can you not. And radar function is still basically the same as well. As for just showing the extra stats, they're all the same thing. You have biosensor, ECM, radar function, radar standard. It's all the same. For the core, again, the only new thing is cooling. These are all the same. The one main difference is that EO cores are now a thing that exist. So EO cores, opposed to having overboost, pop out one or two turrets and deal damage based on just the information here. All of them in 3 are energy damage, which also costs energy to fire. The big thing of note is the energy exceed orbit cores, which is what EO stands for, regenerate ammo when they're closed. The 100 ammo machine gun one rapidly regens every bullet at a time. The 36 ammo rifle shooting one gets about 10 back at a time, and then the really heavy 12 shot one. So apparently the rifle one in this one has 50. My apology points still gets 10 back at a time, and then the really heavy 12 shot one gets all 12 back at the same time after a period of time. Silent Line also introduced solid shell ones, which have a lightweight machine gun core, a dual rifle core, and a dual linear gun really heavy core. I believe at least the rifle and linear one are hidden parts. The machine gun one might be also. Now for arms, the main different stats here are energy supply, which is a percent multiplier to your left arm blade or shield stats for how much damage the shield blocks or how much damage the blade deals. 100 is just regular damage. In this game, the energy supply goes up to 130, which is a 30% boost. AC2, it caps at 135. I don't know how low it goes, but now for the other stats, recoil control is as it says here. The higher impact or higher strength weapons like a bazooka, certain snipers and whatnot, the bigger weapons, grenades, damage the actual lock-on a bit when it's used if your recoil is not high enough. And reaction speed is how fast you can blade again. This is not how fast the blade swings, it is once you swing, how long do you have to wait to blade again. The lower the better. It is whatever unit of time is used for fire rate. I don't even believe it's frames. So the lower the number, the better. A tank, when you're holding forward or backwards, also seems to shorten the time if you just hold forward or back as you're spamming the blade. It also helps you a bit with the actual lock-on. As for legs, I mean, it's all the same. The only main difference is that stability is now broken into landing stability and defensive stability. Defensive stability actually works in this one, unlike AC1, and does what it's supposed to do. But likewise, if it's not high, even rifles and whatnot can really stun you. Now, landing stability is if you hit the ground at too high of a speed, you will get temporarily stunned. The speed that you have to break to get that depends on the landing stability for your legs. If you're generally bunny hopping, you shouldn't have to worry about that. Now, boosters, same thing as before. So FCS, something that I'm going to point out here is that everything here is the same. The only difference is it actually points out to you what the lock range is. It didn't in AC1. And then precision is now again also a stat to try to tell you how accurate it is. The numbers are small. It's not really necessarily what you have to pay too much attention to. You'd much rather be paying attention to the sight range, lock speed, and everything else. The precision isn't that important. Except that obviously with this one is 4. I think it may I'm not actually sure which one's higher. Again, I've never really paid attention to it. Makes kind of no sense that the narrow deep for sniping would be less accurate, so I'm not really sure what they were going for with that. So generator, the main difference is the generators have a calorific value, which means nothing to anyone in words, but what it is that this is how much heat your generator passively puts out. So the higher that this number is, basically the worse your cooling is because you have a stat fighting against it. Now, as for AC3 and Silent Line, any generator besides the RAWs is completely worthless unless you're doing a certain company only. Unless you are doing a Mirage part only run, there is a single really rare use case of why you wouldn't want the RAWs. And again, normally I don't recommend parts in these guides, but I mean, there's just no point. It's not like it has low capacity. It actually has very high charge capacity. I mean, all of these are lower. Both of these don't really change. I guess the only fault is that the red zone's kind of small, but you don't need it. And then just the weight of anything else comparable is just so high that there's just no point. Now, as for the actual radiator, something that was added with cooling in 2 is a radiator, which is just regular. This is how your AC fights cooling, which is when you get hit with a weapon or anything that builds up heat, the heat gauge goes up, and then the cooling of all of your parts plus the radiator is added together. The calorific value for passive heat of the generator is taken off, and that's what your cooling is. Forced cooling is once you start overheating, this will get added on top of the cooling for extra cooling, but it drains energy faster. I believe in AC3 and Silent Line, it just doubles the energy drain. Nexus and Last Raven. Yeah, so Nexus and Last Raven, there's a emergency energy drain, which is much higher. Which is also partly why a lot of people say that Nexus is horrible for heat, but you'll learn that at that point. I mean, all of these other things are basically the same. There's some new parts you can figure out. For the overall weapons, stats are the same. None of these numbers have really changed. The only major change is ammo heat, which is how much heat the weapon deals when it hits something. So at that point, every other stat's the same. That's the only other thing I can point out is that there's energy shields now as well. There's also left arm guns. In this one, having a left arm gun that locks on, so anything that isn't the actual flamethrower will shrink your AC's lockbox. Nexus has a stat that explains how much based on your FCS. This is just there's a certain percent shrinkage. It's not that noticeable unless you're using a small FCS. And then for energy shields, when you when you press the left arm button, you'll hold the shield in front of you. It has a usage drain, and these are its defenses. It adds cooling, and this is the coverage. And okay, so the shield coverage is the size for angle. So it is a 73-degree defense when it's held up in front of you. And as for optionals, I mean, you can read what they all do. None of the, unlike the other game, these all basically do what they say that they do. And then there's option part, intensified. This is how Human Plus works in this game. You can either get it from AC3 at the end and follow the objectives you can find online to unlock the different bonuses, or if you don't carry it over into Silent Line, you get it for either 99% or 100%ing the game. Or might be from beating every mission is one of those. I've never just started a blank Silent Line run and then filled it all the way through. And this is actually a really nice one, which extends the attack range for the EO core. And at that point, this is the only game that has it, I think. It's quite nice, but not necessary. Now, as for the actual build guide, it's really generally the same as AC1. There's not really many new parts that you need to know, especially this is how it works. Op-Eye is easier to get and can be turned on and off. The main thing is that having Op-Eye for having Human Plus prevents you from using the optionals. So there is actually a penalty for using it, because like these defense-based optionals can be anywhere from 5 to 35% more effective health. The lower your okay, so the lower that your AC's defense, as well as just the overall lighter it is, the better these are. The generator capacity is there, doesn't necessarily need it when you have Op-Eye, but the main also thing is, besides lock-on speed for using missiles, the sight box size, turning speed, is that you can't use the 3 energy optionals for increased power, increased fire rate, and reduced energy cost. Well, this one may not matter. These two combined for only 4 points can be up to like a 50% damage increase for the energy weapons, as well as affecting the energy EO cores. But then everything else basically works the same. The only other difference from AC1 is that there are hover legs now, which came in 2. Hover legs float on water, so you will not drown on water, as well as they have got boosters built in, which unfortunately this game, just like the tanks, doesn't show you what their boosters get. Doesn't show you the booster drain or anything else, so you'll have to try out a bit. But the other main thing is they're very, very fast. Quads starting in this game walk and don't slide across the ground anymore. But these ones do slide and move ridiculously fast without boosting, but unlike quads for the old games, you can also ground boost in them. There is also an overboost trick I have in a different video. But the main thing of these are they float on water. They're really good. Like if you are not good at dodging around, you're not good at bunny hopping or managing the energy, or that, you can use these and just outmaneuver things with speed, but they do have the main flaw of most of them can't carry too much weight. They do have a decent energy drain. The built-in boosters can't be changed, and so they're not that great in the air. But overall, they're fast. You can slide past stuff really well. And yeah, they float on water. And that's really it. The only other thing is, again, left arm guns. You can do a lot of neat things with them. So a good example is, one of my favorite things to do is just have a pair of 2 rifles in the game, and it goes by great. Yep. Okay, so if anyone has any specific questions about things that I didn't cover, please let me know. I went over every single new stat. Point out that Op-Eye does have a detriment in this game of not having optionals, so while having Op-Eye for the boost and cannons and everything, you take more damage without the other optionals. The energy weapons deal heavily less damage and fire rate, as well as just you can't lock on as fast using missiles, and you get a smaller lockbox because you don't have the optional for bigger lockbox. Thank you very much, everyone. This video was done for Gumball on YouTube, or asked for it, so I'm not going to have the editor edit it. At this point, I think it's good enough. Don't need to cut out the few tiny parts I messed up. I hope that this really helps you out, Gumball, and thank you very much, everyone.